and individuals on these issues for at least, I guess, close to 15 years now. Our broad issues are energy, climate, sustainability, land protection, water and solid waste, air quality, and of course, there's lots of others that kind of are in more than one of those. And our focus, we're part of, and a lot of groups are part of us, and there's all sorts of different conservation-related groups and environmental groups. Our particular focus is on advocacy, on action, and on accountability. We advocate for specific positions on specific bills, for specific funding of important things, and we try to encourage others to take action to do that. And then we try to hold our public officials accountable for what they do and don't do. So before we turn to the review of some of these bills that we have been watching this year and looking forward to next year, I'd like to note that there's any number of good reasons just to kind of know about the legislature and about how the state looks at environmental issues and conservation issues. It's just part of being a citizen, and that's great if that's why you're on, to just sort of round out what you know and know how to do or know about the issues. But our hope is, we hope at TCV that those of you participating, and I know several of you already do this, will want to not just be aware of, but become actively involved in helping Tennessee get good laws passed and defeating bad laws. It's not an easy thing. It's an important thing, and it can be done. It has been done, and we'll talk about more about at the end of the session about what we do at TCV to help make that happen a little bit easier. So let's turn now to bills to start with that could be acted upon in the General Assembly. Everyone knows this by now, but we're right around the corner from the June 1st session of the General Assembly. The legislature has not been in session in the summer for many, many months. Many years, probably 20 years. But they're coming back, as you know, because of the need to kind of scatter across the state and take care of things involving the pandemic. So they begin again on June 1st, and they could do a lot of bad things, a lot of good things in those few days. It turns out that they're starting next week, Wednesday or Thursday of next week, to come back for committee meetings, particularly in the House. And then they start in earnest on June 1st to wind up dealing with the bills that they want to deal with. And some of those involve the environment. Some of those could be very helpful or harmful. The Senate is hoping to only make changes to the budget, basically, and a few other bills that they've highlighted. They want to get home. They don't want to be here. And in fact, they wanted to adjourn and not just recess back in mid-March. So they're going to be hoping to get in and out. The House, however, has a whole week of committees next week, and they have all sorts of bills that they want to pass for various reasons, and they're on totally different pages here. And we'll have to see. The one thing that they, practically speaking, have to do is pass a budget. It's the only thing that's required by the state constitution that they do, and they've already passed one. But they considered it a very much of a reduced budget, a bare bones budget. But they now realize that if we don't change that budget and slash and burn more things, then we'll be in worse shape in terms of debt and in terms of our deficit for the year. So everyone in both parties expects them to come back and make a lot of big cuts all across the state and what we deal with and what we care about, especially environmental and conservation things. It won't be the only thing they cut, but we're worried that they will cut into those. So let's talk about what some of these pending bills are. We'll start with the bills and then get to the budget. I mentioned the broad areas are energy and sustainability, land protection, water, solid waste. We often do more air-related things than we have this past year. There's not many specific air bills that are around, but let's talk about energy and sustainability. Let's talk about coal. So it turns out that our legislature loves coal. It is their favorite thing in the world. They like it. It's the solution to almost every question in terms of the environment, in terms of energy. And that may sound odd. It's not sort of the way the whole country is, but that's the way they are about coal. And there is a very important bill that is still pending. Our legislature has brought coal back to Tennessee. They have been over backwards to try to expand coal. They think that's the major solution to the energy problem. So we have a long way to go with our state legislature. And there's a bill, Senate Bill 1633, House Bill 1675, and it requires that our state implement federal law changes quicker than they were supposed to make it harder. The whole purpose of the federal law was to make it harder to retire coal-fired plants. Our state is against that. Our state legislature is against that. The department is not. And I just, it's beyond what some of us can think of almost, because it's so contrary to what seems to be the obvious path forward. But the idea of pushing that up and making the department move more quickly to have a regulation that makes it very, very hard to retire any coal plant in the state is likely to come up and probably pass. It's on the list of bills that the Senate has said we are going to take up. So that is a very concrete thing that we can be involved in the next few days. And again, I didn't mention it at the beginning, but we should have time at the end of this session to have questions. If you would, you have a chat feature. Most of you are familiar with that by now. But if you would send that in, it's the easiest way to kind of have a conversation. So send that in, and Colleen, who works with me, will help organize that as we talk about questions at the end. So make note if you'd like to about some of this. So that's the key bill that's coming back in this short session about energy and sustainability. Turning to land protection, I want to talk about a billboard bill. For some, billboards don't seem like the major issue of the year, and the billboard folks who are actively involved in trying to limit it wouldn't say that either. But the fact is, it is an important issue, and we are having to fight against a total. We're almost at the point of the billboard industry carrying every issue on this rewrite of the Billboard Act, which has implications. So there's two bills. We have no current law on billboards. It was held unconstitutional. Many other states' billboard acts were too, because they dealt with they weren't content control. So for reasons unrelated to the environment, they were thrown out. So we have no billboard regulation law. So one bill was from the department that sought to simply fix that problem of content neutrality. The other bill was from the industry, and it's a very disappointing bill from the billboard industry. It adds everything they ever wanted, everything they tried to get over the last 15 years, and that the state Department of Transportation and the legislature wouldn't let them have. And now it looks like it will go through. Those kind of things are problems that we were afraid that they will engender with the bill that they're trying to pass are not adequately protecting vegetation, pushing for excessive and distracting flashing lighting on billboards, not being reasonable in terms of spacing between billboards and things like that. So for a while, it looked like nothing was going to pass. That result might have been better for us than, and also Senate Tennessee, a member group of conservation voters, than for a bad bill to pass. But now it looks like there might be a compromise between the state and the billboard industry. We don't know what's in it because no amendment has been filed, but it will be coming up. It's one of the short list of bills that even the Senate, which doesn't want to take up much, has agreed we have to take up. So be on the lookout for more information about that. Another important land and water related protection bill is what we have called on our calls the mitigation bill. In the context of mitigation of conservation, mitigation means a measure or an act that is required by state regulation to moderate or alleviate environmental impacts. So there's a pending bill in the legislature that would might still pass. It could still pass, that would allow penalties to be assessed on groups engaging in mitigation who fail to do certain things like complete certain steps in a timely way. Mitigation system, I think every environmental expert thinks is in disarray in Tennessee and has a long way to go to get where it ought to be. But this particular bill with penalties and a lot of uncertainty as to whether it's the right approach is not one that is endorsed and supported by most of the conservation and environmental groups, including advocacy groups. There's some disagreement on that, but most of the groups that are member groups of TCV believe that this bill in its current form is not the answer, but it raises some very good questions. So that's not necessarily one that we'll be weighing in on a great deal, but it's we're watching and we'll report on. Moving quickly now to water and solid waste. And there are people on this call who know more than I do about the details of this, but one of the major bills is to weaken regulation of subsurface sewer disposal. Now, I don't know if you've given a lot of thought to subsurface sewer disposal, but it is a water issue. What it means is a system other than a public system or a community system which receives sewage, and included in that are like septic tanks, privies, chemical toilets, things like that. So it's not a system. It's a very more informal sort of thing. And there is a major effort by the home builders to dramatically reduce regulations on that. Let's see, what did I do there? So we're watching that. We don't know if it has enough oomph to go through, but it would have impacts on water quality, obviously, and it would require no approval by the state for this to happen. So it's a very dangerous bill. Another one is a bill that would increase the amount of sewage spread on drip fields. I don't know how many of you have spent a lot of time thinking about drip fields, but it is a critical issue for water protection. What it means is sort of the way you might expect when you hear the words sewage and drip and fields in a sentence. It actually allows sewage to be spread on land by use of what they call drip fields or spray fields. So it means wastewater can be spread all over land, certain lands, and developers could install the whole wastewater systems to do this, decentralized wastewater systems, without any approval from TDEC in their design or construction. And then amendment in the bill basically says it eliminates the possibility of a permit even being required for modifying such a land application. So it would be a way to increase sewage on land. Doesn't seem like a great idea. It has a lot of support from private concerns and may pass. The next thing about this upcoming session is the budget. If you think about it, some of you were around a few years ago when we had a recession. I hate to say this, but one of the first things that got cut was the state parks budget. And there's a lot of funding that many of you know about that has for years been very helpful in acquiring new lands and in taking care of our wilderness areas. We're very worried that as the state tries to deal with having a lot less revenue than anyone ever thought we would, that cuts will be made on parks and natural areas. We don't want to talk a whole lot about that until we see what the governor's proposal would be to reduce the budget. But we need to be ready to have our voice heard. The second major part about that is the state's capacity to regulate and protect in general. Part of what we're concerned about, obviously, is parks, rivers, greenways, natural areas, but we're also concerned about appropriate environmental regulation, the ability to regulate. our legislature is not notably impressed with the importance of regulating private industry. And we do not have strong laws as it is. We fear that with lessened staff and changing certain laws, we would be in worse shape. So those are some major issues dealing with anyone who cares about the environment or conservation issues that could come up in this special session regarding the budget. So I want to, of course, encourage you to be writing things through the chat if you have questions about this, and if I can answer it, cannot answer it, someone else may be able to. But let's move now. Colleen, could I ask you about where we are on time?
We're doing all right on time right now. We probably have another 10 minutes.
Okay, great. Let's move to potential new bills for next year, bills that maybe were up this year that didn't pass, that we may be facing, good and bad bills, and maybe new bills. One is tire recycling. We worked very, very hard with other environmental groups to do this. Senator Dickerson from Davidson County worked for 2 years on coming up with a very effective bill that would improve the way that we did used tire recycling with very small cost to anyone. It was defeated by the Senate Environment Committee with the strong opposition of the Senate Environment Chair, who would never really tell us why he was against it. We hope to be back with a lot more support next year because right now, as some of you probably know, tires in Tennessee quite often end up in rivers and lakes at the end of rural roads, things like that. We'll be exploring more ways to try to pass that next year. One of the great success stories this last year that didn't quite pass was a bill to limit or ban carry-out plastics from restaurants and grocery stores, which of course is a huge issue for water quality, but also for sustainability in terms of plastics never dying, never going away. It might sound strange to you if you hadn't followed the news, but legislators on both sides, both parties, were very favorably impressed by trying to do something about this. It was a surprising coalition of people. It's a big thing to say we're going to regulate private industry by saying you cannot allow plastics and carry out plastics to be used at all. But it got a favorable hearing. It did not pass. It was sent to the summer study committee, which will not meet, but that's their way of kind of getting rid of a bill. But we were very encouraged by strong advocacy from citizens and a lot of support from legislators in both parties. So that's the second thing for next year. A third would be testing water in schools for lead contamination. A lot of support for that. There was a bill. We didn't have enough time this year. The sponsors didn't have enough time. We didn't have enough time to do a whole lot because they left in mid-March, as they should have. But that's a bill that will be back, I believe, with strong support from advocates. We're hoping there'll be opportunities for actually more revenue to protect forests and parks. This year, there was a proposed constitutional amendment filed to set forth a new funding source for parks and forest acquisition. It didn't come from us, and we're not really sure how much support it has, but we want to explore that and see if there's more creative ways to get more funding for our state parks and forests. There's a bill that was filed last year on sustainable agriculture. People who are regulars in following the legislature may be surprised a little bit to know that it was sponsored by Frank Nicely in the Senate, who is very anti certain things, but happens to be an actual sustainability farmer. He has a farm and he uses these methods, and he wants to make it a statewide system of doing it. So we'll be working with him on that. The House sponsor was John Ray Clemens. For those of you who are interested in strange bedfellows, the two of them would not normally be on the same side of any bill. Just to remind people or tell people who haven't had any real experience with the legislature, it's not all of these kind of technical bills or these kind of well thought out bills that maybe have one or two ways of looking at them. We're also going to be facing a bill next year that we had this year to say whenever an agency, and what by that they probably meant TDEC more than anything else, whenever an agency was going to repeal an old rule, anytime they wanted to put a new rule on somebody, a new regulation, they had to just pick one rule to throw out. on the assumption that, well, all these rules are basically nonsense anyway. And so we can just pick some and throw them out. But that didn't pass this year, but gives you some sense of the kind of mentality that we have to deal with to some degree. Another bill that shows you that sort of that the battle is a tough battle is there was a bill filed to terminate the entire Department of Environment and Conservation. Did not pass, was probably meant to just have a legislator say, we think you're stupid, and we don't have any respect for you. So you got that point across. But it's an interesting atmosphere. It's not an atmosphere we can't win in, but it is a surprising atmosphere that people have to get used to be effective advocates. Another bill is the CPACE, the Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Act, which would provide a tool on financing and make it easier to finance energy efficiency. And we can talk about that more next year because I think there's going to be some significant interest in passing it. TCV has a role in public policy advocacy, a very specific role. And one of those is to be on the Hill. I am at the legislature whenever the legislature is there. Not every moment of the day, but that's what I do. When the legislature's in session, I'm there and reporting to people on a weekly basis. So we also provide information to groups and to individuals on how to successfully engage in the legislative process, on the legislative process, not just the content. Advocacy skills. This year we were really pleased to see co-sponsors with Sierra Club, Environmental Council, and the Tennessee Interfaith Power and Light on a very well-attended day on the Hill, which involved a lot of skills building as well as visiting with legislators. We also, every week during the session, and we'll start again either this week or next week, provide weekly email updates of bills, and which also suggest key actions when it's appropriate. We can't talk about every bill, but we try to pick out a couple of important ones every time. So those are ways I hope you can plug in to what we do and make an actual practical difference in what kind of laws and regulations we have. And I think that was most of what I wanted to get across. And there may be some questions. And Colleen, give me another time check so we will keep to our plans.
You're doing all right on time, and we do have a few questions.
Good. Ask me some easy ones, and then maybe we'll run out of time before I have to answer the hard ones.
The first question is from Gary. He asked, with plastic bags being the option of choice during the pandemic, what are your thoughts about the impact of this bill?
Well, it was a real setback to hear publicity about how some stores banned people from bringing their own bags in or strongly discouraged it. So that's all we really needed was a PR battle like that. So it's not a good thing, Gary, and I think it might set us back somewhat, frankly. Haven't talked to the sponsors of the bill, who, by the way, is Senator Briggs from Knoxville, who's just very, very impassioned about this issue. So I don't know. It's a good point to raise. Sometimes things happen that undercut us that you never could believe. So I don't have much more to say except you've got a very good point. It may make it a little bit harder, and maybe this is incremental. Maybe it's not a absolute ban on plastics. Maybe it's a step forward, and maybe we can come up with other options that will move us forward in terms of reducing use. Another question?
Yes. There's also a question. Did you say that the Senate does plan to take up the coal bill in June?
Did I say that? Yes. We did not know that until today. We knew it was there, that the Senate had said we're not going to take up many bills except the budget, but they released a set of bills yesterday, I think. And they are going to try to move forward on Senator Trigger's bill to provide a heightened schedule for getting more coal going. Yes, we do have that battle to fight.
Similar question. Axel's asking, does the General Assembly think that they can tell TVA what to do with their plants?
The sophisticated ones do not, but it plays well back home to contributors. I didn't just say that out loud, did I? No, I probably didn't say that. So they do know, I guess, intellectually that they can't just tell TVA what to do, but they feel like they need to get TVA's attention. They were so outraged that TVA actually shut down a coal-fired plant in East Tennessee, that they've been trying to pass bills about it ever since. A couple of years ago it happened. So yes, sometimes they do know more than you would think from the bills they sponsor, and they're doing it for effect, maybe because some major financial contributors want them to make some noise about it. I will point out that they are unabashed. They believe that their candidate won the presidency, and that he has saved their industry, and that they need to make hay while the sun shines and really move forward on more and more coal, and helping the public see coal as the only answer, and that all this other stuff is just frou-frou. Anything else?
Yeah, we have one more question. Will you be sending out alerts on these bills?
Yes, we do during the session. We send reports every week, and mostly at one or two, and not more than that, because people can't, we're hoping people craft their own responses to some things, but we do highlight a few things that really need to have action. And that's during the regular session. This may be only a 1 week or a 2 week session, but we will be putting out reports. I'm hoping to get one out this weekend about which bills that go over some of the issues I've talked about here, and tell folks when the bills are coming up in committee. The legislature as a whole is not back next week, not till June 1st, but the House committees are meeting. Several of the House committees are meeting. Only one Senate committee is meeting, Senate Finance. So we will probably get something out by the end of this weekend highlighting where some of these key bills are, and we'll do it on a weekly basis. There are ways to get more involved than just to read those things. And if you're not getting them, make sure you let us know by looking up, by just sending us information by checking our website, 10conservationvoters.org. It's at the bottom of this little screen. And we would love to have more people receiving those. We send it to several. How much would you say?
We send it to 3,000 people on average.
Thanks, Kendall. And we're happy to have 3,200 who get it if you'd like. Do I have any more time?
I think we have time for one more question, which is good because we have one more question. Axel asked, what is the possibility that the governor will raid the real estate transfer tax?
I think it's very good, honestly. This happened before. It was raided under Governor Bradison's administration, who sent word to us that there had been a problem with the first budget, that he had to find a way to plug some holes, and that he knew we would hate this, and he'd find a way to get it back in the budget. And he did, but we did without it for a little while. So they do like to look at these big funds that have built up. And frankly, there are legislators who will tell you they think we've gone overboard on how much land we have that's not taxable, that is out there just doing nothing except being pretty and having trees in it and stuff like that. So yeah, it's going to be a battle not to have that kind of funding taken, reduced. I would imagine he may be thinking about that in his proposed budget, and that maybe some legislators are thinking about it if he doesn't put it in the budget. So kind of hate to end on that note, but I do want to maybe end on this note, that it is not an easy place to be an environmental and conservation advocate if you feel like you have to win everything. There's value in making the case. We win some of our bills. We some bad bills. We pass some good bills. But if we're not there, it's just going to be a lot worse. So whatever you're feeling about some of what you're picking up from this training, or other things about, gosh, we're just not on the same wavelength of these folks, that can be overcome by a good bit of educating and action and by being statewide, which is what TCV tries to do, work with other groups around the state and have statewide membership ourselves. So we need your help, and we can provide practical ways to get involved in this. So thank you for being part of this. Colleen, anything else I need to know?
No, I don't think so. Thank you guys so much for joining. If you have further questions, feel free to email Stuart directly at stuart@stuartclifton.com, and that's in the chat if you want to copy and paste that before you.
I would be very happy to get individual emails and do my best to get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you. Thanks a lot for being part of this.
Thanks for joining, everyone.